So again, official welcome to Mark Ignacio, our new customer success manager. So those of you listening in, if you see that email come across, we sent him. So happy to have him on board. The usual, get going with some housekeeping items. So if you are new to this call, glad you're here as well. So we're always happy to have new Lifecyclers. Every Wednesday, we have our new to LCI meeting on Wednesdays at 1. And if you cannot make them, we have them recorded. So if you feel like I didn't get an invite to a new to LCI meeting and I want one, then please do put a note to me in the chat, and I will make sure that you get invites as well. Also, we like to remind everyone where we're going to be because we would love to see everybody live. So coming up, we've got Alex in 2 weeks at Kernan's Mastermind. Then we've got, I don't know that I can get this right in order, CompTIA, then Build It, and then Big, and DattoCon, and also Evolve. So lots of opportunities. If anyone is interested in CompTIA, August 2nd through 4th, I do have 10 free tickets that I can give away. So if you're interested in that one, you should, we'll be at IT Nation Connect. Absolutely. That's, CompTIA will be in Chicago. So do me a favor, if you're interested in the CompTIA one, if you send me an email, so I will put my email in the chat, although I'm pretty confident most of you know how to get us. If you're interested in that one, then just send me an email and I'll reply with the link for it. So that is where we'll be. And I am going to jump into the dashboard. So again, those of you that are new, every week we, pick a new topic. You should get an email on Mondays, usually, from me saying, here's the recording from last week, and this is what we're going to talk about this week. And if you're like William, when you're so excited to find out you're going to learn about assessments, you come 10 minutes early just so you don't miss it. So, perfect. I love that. So what we have found is that now we've had life cyclers, William in particular. William, you were one of our first life cyclers, and you've been doing assessments for a while, so you might want to edit the assessments. And so we've gotten a lot of tickets recently on how to do some edits, what are best practices around it, and strategies for updating. What happens to the data if I change my assessment? Now, some of you are thinking, editing assessments, I haven't even built a new one. So I'm going to start from scratch and walk through, I would say, what most folks are doing around assessments. But I'm including some pieces that even you, Greg Webb, who have been in the platform plenty and give us, suggestions, some new things for you as well. So I acknowledge that a solid 90% of this, some of you may know, but there will be hopefully a couple tricks and treats along the way that'll make you, that'll give you some tips to learn from. So again, the goal of assessment is to really drive the conversation in a business review, right? Drive the risk conversation. And I think many of you know this, but I want to point this out again because not everybody utilizes this. Your subscription covers basically the automated reports, the asset list, the user list, the budget forecast, and the recommendation and contracts feeding the budget. But you can do assessments on all of your partners for no additional charge or for prospects. So let's see what that looks like, because there are a couple different ways you may want to approach it. I will go into integrations. I'm going to click into my primary integration and go to company selection. The count here in the VCIO active column, that's your subscription. So if you signed up for 5, 25, 100 clients, you can select them there. Assessments only is wide open. You can absolutely click on everybody in that column that's not already turned on for VCIO. So if you haven't done that, feel free. And notice in my third column over that my prospects are pulling over from the PSA. So you can do this on prospects as well. So if you didn't know that, you now know you've got free assessments for all. We should get rolling with them. So now, the other piece is, If I've got VCIO here, that's the module that you're naturally in. Assessments only, where are those people? Because they're not in the drop-down picker anymore. So those of you that have done this before, we moved these. You now click on this modular selector and you go to assessment only for the clients that are, cleverly enough, only in the assessment portion of the platform. So the assessment tab itself will look exactly the same, but that is the one difference, is that you access those. So you can see there's a drop-down picker here of the assessment only clients. I'm going to do this from the VCIO side of the house, since that's how most of us are getting to the assessments. I'm going to go into assessments, and this I'm going to pause so that for the new folks on the call, I'm going to make sure we get you moving in the right direction. First, if you're thinking, well, I'd like to do assessments, but we all know Marnie and Alex both talk too fast, and how am I ever going to remember all of this? I'm going to click into help. I'm going to type welcome. I'm going to grab the welcome article, and there are 5 videos. The third one is 30 minutes on all about assessments. So if you just want to watch me click through this, but later, because what else would we be doing on a Saturday afternoon, that when you're going over the assessment, you can look at that recording and click through it. Okay, back to assessments. So if you're new in, you're going to click Manage Assessment Templates at the bottom. And the top half, which I'm going to scroll past, is empty for you because you wouldn't have any templates in your library yet. You're going to review the assessments in the bottom half, and you can click in and take a look and see what they say and see if you like them. So you can go in, review the questions. I would expand all of the items to take a look at what everything looks like. And you're basically just looking to see if this is an assessment you'd be interested in using. If it is, you would then go over to the right-hand side and click import. A large percentage of our partners, if you are not bringing in assessments that you have already used, start with our default assessment and edit from there. So feel free to use any and all of them. But if you're thinking, I really haven't done any of these yet, where should I start? I would recommend the default assessment. Take note that just below it, near the bottom, is our pre-sales assessment. If you are interested in doing an assessment for a pre-sales, for a prospect, you might want to look at that one. What that's done has taken out all of the items that you wouldn't have access to if they're not a client yet. Tim, I will have to look and see if we can get that HIPAA one loaded. It just might not be my demo site, but I will see. I know you had talked about that one. Once you have it loaded, you will see it then in the top of your, here it is. I see it at the top, Tim. You will see it at the top of your library, and now you can click in and edit it. Now, this is going to be important for everyone because we're talking about what happens when you edit an assessment that has already been used, right? So I think if you are new to this editing will be the same as the conversation I'm going to have with everyone else. But for those of you that have done assessments before, we try to show you when your data is already in use. I'm going to expand my item and show you even the scores that you have used before. So if I said, I no longer need this needs attention here, nobody has used it, I can delete it and nothing's going to change, right? So right out of the gate, that works for you. A lot of folks find typos in their own assessment, not in ours. There may be in ours. Who am I kidding, right? We don't have Grammarly hooked into this. You can edit for typos and that would be no problem whatsoever, right? That's not going to change any data. If you add new items, that's not going to impact anything either. And I'm going to show you what that looks like, but let's just revise an item. If I go to delete a choice, it is going to remind you if this item was used on other assessments and this choice was used, you're going to lose that data. Perfect. I'm going to cancel that because I really don't want to delete it. But you will get warned if you're going to delete some places where data is in use. Some other things while you're in looking at the items. I'm going to show properties.
Quick question, the in use on the right-hand side, does that indicate it's been used in other templates?
That means it was used on this, for this template.
Okay, in other assessments. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Nope, no worries. When I show properties for my events, this is where folks insert links to documentation on how to score. For example, select, this, what was this one? This was asset inventory. Look at the Lifecycle Insights asset list and see how many devices are past end of life. But really you can answer this green all the time because we automate this with Lifecycle Insights, right? So however you're checking this and when you would score it red, yellow, green is what you're going to enter here. So you can really go through and update how to score and any explanation, remediation that you would want to do. So if there were some items where you were listing score red in case of this, you would put, if it's red, we're going to recommend sonic walls. We're going to recommend, whatever solution you would are aligned to your best practices. If you're not planning on using an item whatsoever, you can delete the item, save changes, and you can rearrange items in the layout view. So I can go to the layout view, switch these around, and it will move them not just on this assessment, but on your previous assessments. So this is what's important about that. If I've decided I no longer am really selling endpoint security software, I could just stop scoring it and it wouldn't show up on any reporting. But I could also, if I didn't want to lose the data, I could just move it to the end of the report and it would just hang out, never scored, never to be looked at again, and out of your way. So if there's data you don't want to lose in the process, but an item you're no longer selling, that would be a best practice in how to manage that. I'm now going to go into the event itself. Oh, that's a good one, Tim. I'm going to click into an event and I'm going to go into a pre-sales assessment because it'll be easy for us to check out exactly what's happening to the scoring. And I'm going to go down to an item I don't use as much, especially since Alex is on the call. We don't want to throw him off later. Let's go to directory services. I can see that I've scored this before, right? They got a 3 out of 3 on here. And when I go to the events list on this pre-sales assessment, I can see, so I'll take the one from 6-7, that I've got 29 answered, 30 total items. So I skipped an item. I'm going to go back into my template and I'm going to decide in my pre-sales assessment that I no longer wanted directory services. So I'm going to delete that item. It's going to tell me that it's in use and I get it. I'm okay. I'm going to lose the data. When I save changes, it's going to update all of my items. So I'm not going to be able to retrieve this data. This item is going away. So I've lost all data on historical assessments around this. So we're going to give you 2 warnings on this to make sure that's really what you want to do. So what is the best practice on when you would delete an item? When you're truly not delivering those services anymore and you no longer care that you used to deliver that service. Now this seems nuanced, but that really seems nuanced right until you lose data that you didn't want to lose. So that's why we're going over this, right? The one time you needed that data. So if you delete it off the assessment, it is gone. If you are going to want that data in the future, just stop scoring it, move it to the bottom of the report, and we'll keep the data in perpetuity. What I recommend is keeping the data past the next business review so that you're confident you're not going to need that anymore, and then archiving it. Once you're confident we've gotten past an iteration of it, you can move on from there. So I will go ahead, and I don't want to delete that one, but we can create it. I'll create a new one and we will delete there. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new item. I'll make a stoplight template. If you haven't created a new item yet, stoplight template means red, yellow, green. So I can say Marnie's deletable item, at risk, what a nightmare, needs attention, meh, satisfactory, okie dokie. I'm going to save changes. And head back to the event. So now when I go into an event and I go into a pre-sales assessment, I was in the third category. And I now have Marnie's deletable item. It didn't update any of the scoring because I haven't done anything with the item yet. But as soon as I say this is satisfactory, when I go back into my first, I can see right away in my Word doc, we would expect it to be here. Marnie's deletable item. More importantly, let's see what happens on the assessment comparison report, because this is where you're going to want to see what has happened differently. If I go to the third category, I had that deletable item, and you can see that it just leaves a blank there and is now satisfactory. That item that I didn't score this time, so I had unscored VCIO, I had scored it last time as satisfactory, will just leave a blank. So if you think about a service you've stopped delivering, it will basically fall off this report. The next time I deliver this business review, that item won't show up at all because there's no score there whatsoever, but it will stay on for one more while the item is still in the comparison report. Any questions on that? And has anybody run across something where they're curious on best practices? Matt?
This may get into the weeds, and so tell me if you don't.
That is what we're talking about here, so feel free.
The thing that I find myself running into is the same questions will be on different assessments, and we do different assessments for different reasons.
Yep.
But being able to do comparisons is comparisons of assessments, not the question.
Yeah.
Is there any thought, chance of when we pull up a comparison, I'm less concerned about the comparison of the last time I actually ran that assessment. I'm more concerned about the last time I asked that question.
Yep.
And almost because I know the questions and assessments are already detached at a level.
Correct.
Ability for reporting reasons and some of that to just kind of track questions as questions and pull them in and stick them into assessments for history. You know what I'm getting at?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So you definitely could do that, but it won't pull the previous score. It will only, but it will let you see all the previous scores, right? So let me return to scoring for a minute and let's talk about what that might look like. So when you go into an item, I'll go into my trusty one that I recognize. You know how you can show previous responses? This is across all templates, right? So you could build a new assessment that had all of your, maybe you've got, you know, your top 10, dirty dozen, whatever, like these are the things we need to check no matter where they are. You would be able to see. Now, what we would probably want to talk about is there something we could do so it would auto populate the most recent response on that? But it will absolutely create the most recent. It'll absolutely show that. This is actually super important for the two of you. So Greg, I'm glad you showed your camera too, because this is kind of one of the nuggets that I think will be important to you. One of the things that they're pushing out next week in the customer success side of the house is for you to be able to select an assessment as one that you want to use to score as either an effort metric or a health metric, but it would be a single assessment template. So you probably actually want to build that template of like what is going to be the one assessment that counts for health or effort.
And that's, I think what you're getting at is exactly the problem I'm dealing with. Is we started off with, this is the assessment we want to do by default. And all of a sudden we said, no, you know what, we like this other assessment better.
Yeah.
Now we've got all these customers who in the old assessment, we're trying to switch them over, and 90% of the questions are the exact same questions.
Yep.
They're just organized different, whatever. And now trying to switch over, I don't have that history to do the comparison as cleanly.
Yep.
We run into the same thing too when we say we are doing like a migration into 365, or getting rid of servers or things of that nature. We have a different assessment for when customers don't have a server environment, or if they're 100% remote, because the types of things you're checking for in that case is different.
Yeah.
And that will change over the life cycle of the customer.
So that is exactly like this discussion is what I wanted to hear from your perspective, because we want to make it easy for you to be able to adjust a single assessment without losing data. But at the same time, we recognize that as folks start, Tricia, your example is exactly right. Like we're moving to the cloud, so things are disappearing that we're never going to offer again. How can we gracefully hide that? So maybe I need to talk to them about sort of the notion of archiving an item where we don't lose the data. There's always whichever way we pick, of course, the other way is what half the people are going to want. And again, I came from education where we worked on tests all the time, but thankfully, this is not nearly the same type of data as a student test score that's going to keep them from getting into college. So we knew we could give some flexibility around, you could update an item, without causing a data integrity question. But that is a good point of having kind of a master assessment that would pull the most recent items.
Yeah,
go ahead.
And so we definitely have different assessments based on the configuration of the customer or the level of support. There are instances where we don't really do any workstation support. We're just managing the servers and networking. And like I said, customers, sometimes their goals and objectives or their compliance levels change in the questions, and the type of assessment that you bring them through have to change as well. And so just being able to see a history of the questions just in general that have been answered on any assessment that we've put them through, I think that's what's going to be important for us, because we don't want to keep questions in there once something's changed for a customer, because then we have to go in there and mark 20 questions is not applicable every time. It's just not efficient.
Yep.
And Tricia, make sure I'm thinking the same thing you're thinking. You would have maybe separate assessments, one for the cloud, one for the on-premise. 50 of those questions might be the same questions in both. The other 50 are unique to that assessment, but being able to see, no matter which assessment you answered the questions in, see the history of those questions. Is that what you're?
Yes.
Okay.
That's it exactly.
Okay.
Marnie, you were speculating on the alternative option. What is it that we're trying to preserve by keeping this comparison assessment centric instead of question centric?
Well, keeping everything in the same template will allow that time over time comparison. Right now, the assessment comparison report is required, it has to be the exact same template. So the advantage of having a consistent template, client over client, two other reasons. One is the assessment analytics across all customers, right, is by template. So you can see like to like, right? So everybody that's done my sample stack alignment, for example. And then the first iteration, which is coming out next week for customer success, will be a single assessment template that scores either that you could auto populate into health or effort, right? We've had a lot of conversations around what you would want a health or effort score to possibly include. You'd be able to create one master assessment. So I'm wondering if there's a combo platter of what you all both just suggested, of creating a master template that would auto populate the most recent response from either one and would give a score that you could call comparable, whether they were cloud-based or not, or whatever your iteration is, right? I'm just using cloud as the example. But that's something we'll need to think through. I know the first iteration will be a requirement that you will have to pick one template to score for. Now you can include multiple assessments, but you'll have kind of a master one in customer success. Yeah, and I really, because I know folks are adding more and more assessments in the platform, and we're getting questions around what happens if I delete an item, what happens if I add an item, do I lose my data, can I edit an item? I kind of just wanted to talk through all of the permutations of that, so that folks realize what they could do and what they couldn't do. Now, Tricia, I know you said hitting not applicable. I get that. Hitting not applicable 20 times sounds painful to me. If they were grouped in categories where you could ignore a category altogether and it just didn't count, would that be helpful?
It could, but that's not really how we set up the assessment. So we might have like a backup and disaster recovery section, a security section, a networking section. So, and depending on what they have in place, those security questions are going to change, and those backup and disaster recovery questions are going to change based on the infrastructure or the level of infrastructure that we're supporting.
So you'd have multiple, it would impact multiple categories.
Yes.
Because of an infrastructure change. Okay. What else am I not thinking about? We're definitely doing some updates to assessments this quarter. So it's a good time to kind of see what we currently do and what else we may need to do.
Hey, Marnie, it's Tim Golden. How are you?
Tim. Good. How are you?
I'm assuming you saw it in chat, but with doing an item by item comparison as opposed to basing it on the assessment, doing that comparison is what I think we're all kind of all circling around here in this conversation. Is you have an item bank of all the questions, and being able to compare questions over time as opposed to over assessment, right? So if I understand the platform, you have an assessment, and assessment has items. And that's kind of how you're doing the comparison report right now. What I'm suggesting is an item to item comparison, as opposed to basing it on the top level assessment is really what I was suggesting.
Yep. No, that makes sense.
And so when you extrapolate that mindset out, you get done with doing assessments and answering questions, and then you start ticking off one by one, trying to fix them. Having some way on a one by one, like, all right, Duo, they don't have two-factor or whatever. They don't have two-factor. So then you go and implement Duo. Being able to take that one and somehow say we've resolved it without having to go do a full assessment.
Or update 7 different assessments where you just ask the same question.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I know that is definitely a notion we've talked about with the stack alignment and customer success, to be able to connect a single assessment item, that when this is red, it goes red over there. And when this is green, it goes green over there. That makes sense.
Yeah, for us, we wouldn't want the question on all assessments to change. We would only want it to change on the next assessment, because for some of our customers, we want to make sure that we're keeping accurate records.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes. Right. It's basically the asked and answered response, right? Asked it before, we answered it already. Mark that as green going forward.
I wonder if, so I'm looking at analytics across all customers. And I'm going to grab the assessment we're on. I'm going to grab this one. So this is a single assessment, but I wonder, Matt, this is sort of off of what you were saying. If I can multi-select assessments and it just pulled the most recent item, because this is an item analysis, right? This is each individual item from an assessment. Right now, it's based on a single assessment, but goodness knows we've multi-selected other places. So, so if we could multi-select assessments here, that would pull the most recent version of an item. I think that would be a piece of what we've talked about. It is not what Trisha and Tim just mentioned, which would be, all right, the next time we give it, we want to update it because we know we've corrected something. But I'm definitely getting some thoughts to take back to engineering for sure.
And we've also kind of talked a little bit about auto-populating and things like this. And this has been like a little bit of an ongoing debate back and forth. For us, for instance, one of the questions that we have is not just is MFA enabled, but is it enabled for all users that are using that service, right? Because sometimes, somebody could request, or, only a partial number of people actually have MFA required.
Yeah.
We want, if they should have MFA, we want that checked every single time we do an assessment. And so to have some of those answers pre-populated allows the person who's checking, well, first of all, it doesn't know what you can't tell what they've actually checked and what still needs to be done. But it also, it leaves a lot of room for human error for us.
So in an event, when you populate a new event, because if you're not using the same assessment, then you can't copy to do the comparison to see what the previous score was. And you have to go in each time to look at an item. Is that what you're thinking?
Well, it's that, but I think somebody mentioned if somebody goes in and they enable MFA, then it should automatically be marked as satisfactory on the next one. There's got to be a way to note that without actually answering the question, because there's questions that we just don't want automatically answered. And maybe we have to rethink about the questions that we, right, or how we're framing the questions in the assessment so that it would only update the questions specific to the stack. I don't know. I just wouldn't want on everything being automatically pulled from one assessment to the next.
I'm wondering if there's some way to look at in the same way that in a comparison event, right? I can see that I previously said this, and I can see where I previously checked it, and it auto populates to that, but you can change it, right? So yeah, almost to have to approve certain, right? You want to approve an update to a new event if it's something like MFA or whatever.
Right.
Trisha, with that last example, would you be solved if you just said don't copy over previous responses when you make a copy to do the next round of assessments?
That would do it.
Because that's already there. You can uncheck it when you copy it.
Yeah, when you go to create a new one, you could say, yeah, I don't want the previous. You'll still see the previous response, but it won't auto-populate it.
Okay.
Right, so you can see here the third one I've given already, but I didn't automatically put the checkbox in there. Versus if I say, and let me go delete that, or I'm going to have just a pile of a mess in here. If I say add a comparison event, copy over previous response, then that automatically shows here the asterisk in the left-hand column and the fact that I'm pre-checking it.
Uh-huh.
You can make either of those choices.
Okay.
Same thing with the public and private comments. It will automatically show you any public or private comments, but if you want it to auto populate it in there, because maybe you just always put the same canned comments in there, it can do that as well. One of the things for those of you newer to assessments, it's important to think through these pieces because the using of an assessment comparison is powerful, right? To see time over time. So you want the same customers to sort of use the same assessment. And then if you can use batches of customers, the same vertical, the same, some similarities to use the same assessment, then the assessment comparisons become across client analytics are powerful too. Clearly, there are more things as we start using it more often that we need to think about for update purposes. But I just wanted to get ahead of some things, especially we're getting a lot more tickets when support says, hey, you should do a call on assessment questions because 9 people today asked how to do this. I thought it was a good idea.
Yeah, hi Marnie, this is Scott, and we're relatively new. And so I'm hearing some problems I don't even know about yet today.
This is a preemptive strike. You can learn from what everybody else has done.
Right. Yes, I say that in jest. We have put together, kind of the maturity model assessment, and I've kind of thought out further. Okay, well, once we get, once we get to that second, the third, the fourth quarterly, and some of these things have addressed, how is that what's the impact there? And I've kind of done some of that because I've gone through and tested it and checked, changed something from, being at risk to being solved and run the comparison, and you can kind of see that, and that's all good. I like how that all shows. And in the report tool, which is the tool that we use to drive a quarterly, you can add a comparison report, right? Like in tandem with, it's like, okay, well, here's your current risk, and then let's show you the comparison report, which I think is powerful to, obviously to show all that. But what my question here is, if you can show me a little bit more the case for what you just did, which was add a comparative event.
Yep. So let's go back to
and I apologize to everyone who already knows well about that.
you know what? So we try to, with hundreds of partners, we try to make this as all inclusive as we can. So we all learn from everybody else. Okay, so the power of using the assessment comparison piece, the only way the assessment comparison report will work in Report Builder is if you use the same template.
Yep, I know that.
Don't just want to run the same. So when I click over here, I'll make a comparison for this. You have some options, right? You can add, copy the previous response, copy the public, copy the private.
Mm-hmm.
I'll go
ahead. The way I did it, and I apologize. I don't mean to.
No, you're good.
I just haven't seen this dialogue because the way I've done it is from the assessment event screen where you say, okay, I'm going to add another assessment, and it's a comparative version, and I choose the original, right?
Gotcha.
Where it's just it's everything. So I'm trying to understand where this comparison event. Where that comes into play, where it's valuable.
Yep. So this is the one that will give you the side by side, right? And this gives you the options here. So when I add this, I'm going to get a brand new event. I copied over the public comments. I copied over the private. I copied over the score. So it looks exactly the same.
Okay.
But that is how we landed here.
There's a few more options if you just say, if you just go to new, if you go to assessments and say new, assessment event, add a new one, and the version, instead of baseline, it's a comparison.
Yes.
Right?
So this comparison is truly just a tag. So it doesn't actually build a comparison of the same exact template event. So that's where you're going to want to. That is why you're going to want to build best practice. Copy edit here.
Okay, okay,
Yep. If you're doing a second round, you should add it here.
okay. It looked like it did kind of pull everything over, and I could create it from the report. But no, I want to follow best practice. So
Yeah, let me, I can confirm that. So,
no, I trust you.
well, you'll learn, our developers develop fast and furious, so it's easy to sneak something past me.
No.
That I don't know about. Yeah, because when you do it this way, you won't see any previous responses. So, and
Okay.
now I will be able to add a previous event. So that is a plus. You just won't see it inside. Now I never scored the pre-sale, so I picked a bad one to do. Let's see if this one shows anything. So, okay, you won't lose the ability to run a comparison on it, but it will not show you what you scored previously.
Okay. On all the individual items, it just
Exactly.
compares okay, that's where the disconnect
That's the
for me is.
difference, is if you
So-
want to see what you previously did, you want to do it, you want to copy the event.
Awesome. Okay, thank you.
Now, that's
for
a
that.
that's a good nuance to talk through for sure.
Thank you.
Marnie, can you show how to connect a recommendation to an assessment item?
Okay, so you want to go into analytics by customer. And it's so funny you bring this up because I suspect you're going to say the same thing. That was a lot of clicks. We should be able to tighten that up, because today I thought that's a lot of clicks. We should be able to tighten that up. So you go into analytics by customer, link to recommendation. Now this is all of your assessment items across all of your assessments. So you want to change to the specific one. This is where you could multi-select. So
And it's
if
not
you
just
would-
across all types of assessments. If you run the same assessment for a customer 3 times, all 3 of those repeated show up here, right?
correct.
The
Yep.
reason I was asking is I've been starting from recommendations and adding assessment items, and I'm
Yeah.
adding willy-nilly. Like I added to 2 months ago and then another one from 4 months ago, and then I go to look it up and I realized I've been hitting all the wrong stuff.
Yeah,
doing
willy-nilly,
the same
not, not the preferred strategy. Yeah, you are going to want to go grab the one that you did most recently here, right, wherever that is. And I think I should probably get them to sort this in reverse, in most recent to oldest instead of the other way. Looks like it's in alpha order now. Apparently they didn't have a lot at risk this time, but you'll then go grab the items that you want, create recommendation from here.
I was doing the same thing. And the hardest part about it is you didn't know, you didn't remember.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, and then I got to go back through the list and where is the yellow or red? And but there's a really interesting aspect of that, in that when you do it that way and you click to link the assessment option, it brings them all up. And in that version of what you're displayed, next to the risk assessment, it displays a link, the linkable recommendation. And I thought that was something that was interesting, that would be neat to show in the report. And I didn't mean to throw off the previous
Oh, there's-
gentleman's question. Sorry, sir.
Believe me. It's like
Marnie-
soccer goalie Friday afternoons where we just react.
Marty, another question I had is when you look at the analytics by customer and you look at the link to recommendation screen, this is usually where I am when I say, hey, let's look at what we should pick off next. Let's just sort down to red and talk about what we should pick next.
Yep.
Do you have any recommendation for how to have that conversation? Because right now I don't really have anywhere I can start putting notes about we want to do this one before that one and that kind of stuff.
Gotcha. So would adding like a comments column here be where you could enter?
Maybe. I don't know exactly how I want to categorize tracking what to do next and all that, but I know that I'm having that conversation all the time.
So I'm gonna
see what I do with that.
Is it
I was
my
gonna say what
internet
I do
or
with
Chris's?
that is, could be mine.
I hear Trisha fine.
Okay. So what I do with that is every single risk that we have, there's a recommendation. Now I might group them together, but I show them on the recommendations page and I say, you know, here's the recommendation, here's what it's going to cost. Does this make sense for 2023? What do you want to move around? And we do it right there in the document with kind of all of those groupings together. That's how we've been doing it.
As soon as it's read, it gets a recommendation for how to
Yes.
resolve.
And then you can
And then
prioritize
you
it.
categorize here.
Yeah, and that way I can show them, you know, what that whole plan looks like for, we always try to do current plus 2 years on, you know, and honestly, the more often that you're introducing these things to the customer, the more they get for me to do.
Yep. I think that is a good solution to that. The other piece is, now I'm getting a note that my internet's unstable. Well, if we lose the call, have good weekends, everybody. I don't have Alex on to save the meeting. But in the product roadmap, we have some enhancements around assessment that we are looking at, and one of them is being able to tag items. So that you could, so I'm thinking if you wanted to tag the original thinking was that folks wanted to tag priority amongst their risk, and to be able to search and filter by tags. And then we're looking at defining requirements for workflow and assignment of items. I think we're going to have a conversation about, you know, that we just talked about with this superset of items as well. But I wonder if the tagging might also be a way that we could, you know, kind of get some of the same functionality.
I love the idea of tagging those. I mean, even specifically if I need to go back and confirm something later or have a discussion with somebody else, being able to kind of tag or flag those. I don't know if that's what you were thinking, but that would be super helpful to be able to go back to something and find it easily.
So yeah, a lot of folks wanted to be able to tag items by, these are the items that my engineers are going to answer. These are the items that my tier 1 techs are going to answer. These are the ones I have to go back and create a recommendation for or whatever. So we figure the tagging notion is very flexible. So I like your idea of being able to use it after the fact too for review. So we had heard enough different use cases. We knew tagging was important, when we're pretty confident there will be 9 new ways we hadn't even guessed once we build it.
Or even in the report, the recommendation report, if one of the columns showed what the risk it's tied to is.
There is one other piece I thought I would show for folks in assessments that I rarely get asked about, but I did get asked about today. So once every 6 months, someone asked me about it. So I feel like since it was today, I should bring it up. In configuration options, if you want to, so again, these are truly just basically tags, but since we know we're going to tag in the future, this may become more critical in the future. But this is where you can define your cut scores. So somebody asked today, where does it go yellow? Where is it red, right? So 0 to 50 is red, 50 to 80 is yellow, 80 to 100 is green. If you want to change this, you absolutely can. And then same thing with the item score options. You know, this is how we determine the points possible and the color. If you want to change the words, so instead of, you know, at risk, it said danger Will Robbins, you could, but it would change it across all of your assessments. So if that's just not the language you want, you can change this here. Not a lot of people edit this, but if you didn't know about it, I thought I'd point it out.
If you could add to that, that would be an interesting place to put priority. So if you could have an at-risk high priority, and then just an at-risk, that might also do kind of what Greg's trying to do when he's showing those. I mean, you can't add new ones there, but if you could.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I think what we came up with is that we can only have 6, but you could change the color. So if you wanted to remove a not applicable or an unknown and turn it into a high priority, you could. It would go up to, if you haven't used unknown, you could do that. That's an interesting. I'm going to stew on that for a minute. Let me see. There's a comment. Is there a way to add a recommendation from the assessment itself? You know what, Alex, there isn't. And I actually was thinking of that today, meaning something's read and I put in a comment that links to recommendation created right from the assessment. There is not. I was wondering if that would be a use case folks were interested in.
Literally doing it right now. I am actually filling out an assessment as we're listening to this, and I was thinking, I need to make a recommendation for this. I know it's an at-risk item. I have to go in and I can make a recommendation. I can link it the other way,
Yeah.
but this way I would just click a button that takes me in and starts, maybe does the thing. I can fill out all the major details and I can either go right to it, or even if it just puts a placeholder in and I fill out those later, so it's there and I can go in and click it through the recommendation.
That I completely get it. Yep.
What about when you do an assessment or a compare assessment, if it shows there's a recommendation tied to it?
Oh, okay. Oh, right. So inside.
Right. So if it's been like at risk, you created a recommendation, then it says, hey, this is already linked to a recommendation.
Yeah. So you can see that in the overall list, but of at-risk items, but you can't see it in the assessment itself. So in here, you get the column if you've made let me actually get one that has recommendation. You can see if I've made a recommendation, but putting that inside the item, so you could see that a recommendation was made inside the item. That makes sense.
Okay.
That would be nice on the actual assessment too. I mean, best case, it's a link to the recommendation, but if it was just something that identified it, even, it would be nice.
Yeah. I would think if we're going to do it, we should just link to it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it looks like you're already doing it. You're doing it here, so
Right. Clearly, we have the powers, and by we don't mean me. I know all the right people. Okay. Well, I feel like on some of these calls, many of these calls, I feel like I learn more than everybody else showing up to the call. So I think this may be one of those cases. All right. Well, I appreciate it. And anybody else have anything on this or anything else to chat about before I send you home for the weekend? Can you tell I was a teacher? That's a very I'm going to dismiss you for the weekend when the bell rings. Can take the
great. Thank you.
Okay.
I missed half of that due to a ticket, so if you could start over again, that'd be great.
That is why we have recordings right there.
Thanks. Have a good weekend, Marnie.
You too. See you all.
Thanks.